All right. So, how can you dissent and defy effectively? This is going to come from a book that I grabbed purely off of the title because that's how I make decisions a lot of the times. Since I'm pretty open-minded. But anyways, the title is The Art of Insubordination, and this is by Todd B. Kashdan. I guess Dr. Kashdan. I'm assuming it's Kashdan. Anyways, here's the cover. This is what it looks like. If I can move stuff in the right direction, but who is this guy, right? So he's a professor of psychology at George Mason University. He's very highly cited, over 32,000 citations, has over 200 scientific articles, and from what I remember of the workload for what I did in college and publishing my one scientific article, that's a lot of work to do at least 200 of them. But he also was awarded the American Psychology Association's Award for Distinguished Scientific Early Career Contributions to Psychology, and has about 2 other books. And if you watch my previous video, you know how I am with long titles, so whatever. Anyways, who is this book for, right? And to that, we will use his own words. He says it's for anyone who understands the value of nonconformity and recognizes that we desperately need free thinkers willing to disrupt unhelpful norms for the sake of progress, right? And I'm going to come off right off the bat saying when I picked up this book, when I actually read it, it was not exactly what I was expecting it to be. It never is when you grab it just off the title, but definitely worth the read. But just not what I thought it was going to be. Not saying that's a bad thing anyways, but one of his things, basically like his kind of main concept, I guess. Before we get into that, I'm going to talk about why you should read it, just because it kind of makes more sense. But again, quotes, this is a research-based toolbox for anyone who wants to create a world of more justice, creativity, and innovation. And it's the essential guidebook for anyone seeking to be heard, make change, and rebel against an unhealthy, stagnant status quo. Right, so some of the questions that you could answer with this book, and I guess, and figure out on how to do in your own life. So what are the most effective ways to express unpopular, important ideas? How can we help principled rebels be heard and influential? And how can we better manage the discomfort when trying to rebel or interacting with a rebel, right? So a lot of questions, a lot of words. In my opinion, after reading it, I'm trying to think of how to word it. I probably wouldn't take everything from this book, but there are definitely parts that you see his point and it would be helpful to implement into your life, if that makes any sense. So what to kind of expect, he starts off with, it's in 3 parts, has in praise of insubordination, talks about the critical importance of cartwheeling in the library, basically like a girl he was in high school or college, one of the two, basically he was in the library and she cartwheeled up to him and asked for his number and then just cartwheeled away, more or less. And then he talks about how such a profound impact that had on his life and why. There's a whole chapter about it. Talks about how we're wired to fit in, and why principled rebellion matters so much. That's one thing that he talks about. It's kind of the main crux of his book is principled insubordination. It's not just being a prick, if that makes sense. You're not just being insubordinate to be insubordinate or to rebel or whatever. Like there's a legit like logical reason, and like it's actually productive and beneficial, and like you're doing it in like kind of like a professional manner, right? And so kind of how he talks about that, he uses a math equation, which works for me because used to be a huge nerd with that stuff. But anyways, he says principled insubordination equals, and it's basically a deviance times the sum of authenticity and contribution, and that's all divided by social pressure. And so what's he kind of defining this stuff as? So he says deviance is the most important element defining principled insubordination. That's why he puts it as a multiplier. See, there's nothing impressive about being different merely because you're not paying attention to existing standards or behavior, which he calls ignorance. You are forced to disagree, duress. You can't resist the temptation of disagreeing, which is compulsion or lack of self-control, or you give little thought to what you do in a given day. Like there's an actual like, he says successful rebellions don't come from a place of ignorance, duress, compulsion, or randomness. Like there's an actual principled reason for it, right? It's not just doing it for the sake of whatever, or because you're more or less being a prick. Authenticity, he says it's to ensure that the principled insubordinate's actions arise from deeply held convictions as opposed to superficial preferences, right? Again, it's principled. There's a reason for it, kind of like on a fundamental level for the person, I guess. You have to be authentic for it to like actually kind of matter, right? Contribution, so basically it's principled insubordinates intend to create social value. Like there's actual value in what you're doing, not necessarily just cause, like the randomness and duress, compulsion, and ignorance he talks about before. Not productive. So let's see. Principled insubordination is an act of kindness and caring, not coming from like a place for want of authority, place of disdain, spite, or self-interest, right? Like the little parts matter sort of thing. And all of this is divided by social pressure. Basically, the real test of your principles is if you hold on to them when the deck is stacked against you. Acts of rebellion begin with a single uncomfortable step away from safety and security of the herd. And then he talks a lot about Darwin in the beginning, Charles Darwin, and that whole story and stuff. Said you become fair game for misrepresentation, criticism, scorn, and even hatred, an unpleasant consequence of principled insubordination as he's defining it, right? So that's kind of like a little look into the basis of what he's getting at for his book. But principled insubordination is really kind of the crux. Like I said, in aggregate on the book, don't exactly agree with a lot of, no, I won't say a lot, some of the stuff he says, or maybe it's just the way he portrays it, if that makes sense. But that doesn't mean at all that I shouldn't heed some of the stuff that he says. There's definitely productive concepts in there that I may not like because it calls me out to certain degrees. He does that a lot in various different ways. I've been thinking about doing more of like a deep dive in this one. I don't think he'd mind since he's 32,000 citations, so a few YouTube videos shouldn't bother him. But anyways, I think I'm going to go more in depth on this in future videos. I don't like taking them too long, just because, people have things to do. I might do longer story-like things later, but regardless, that is The Art of Insubordination. There's the cover again, if you want it. It's got a big red balloon. if you care. Or then you got the little paper boat hats too. Should have been the first clue. That is not what I was thinking it was going to be. But regardless, good read. Not too long. I keep forgetting to talk about how long these books are. Most of it's citations and notes in the back, which I always enjoy, just because it's shows, you know, it's actually put work into it. Not that books aren't work, it's just like there's just something scientific about a lot of citations. I just got used to, I guess. I don't know if that's just a comfort thing or not. But anyways, it's basically 200 pages at like 200 and a half before all the notes and stuff, if you care about those. But anyways, I'm going to leave this one here. As always, playlist in the top for all the other book reviews, and I'll probably throw other stuff around. But anyways, leave this one here. Hope to see you guys on one of those.